kids, we're going to take a look at the short story Priscilla and the Wimps by Richard Peck. Um, like usual, before you start really reading, look at that title, Priscilla, which is generally a girl's name, and then you have the Wimps. So I'm wondering who the Wimps are. Often they're associated, they don't have a lot of power. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to annotate as I go, of course. There may be a couple of words that I skip. I'm doing that intentionally. So listen, there was a time when you couldn't even go to the restroom around this school without a pass. And I'm not talking about those little pink tickets made out by some teacher. I am talking about a pass that cost anywhere up to $1, sold by Monk Clutter. So if he's selling these, he's probably, I don't know if he's a bully or just someone he likes power. I'm going to put the idea of power here. So, and think about that as we go too, like who has the power, who wants the power, who gets the power, does the power change, how does the power change, etc. Keep that idea of power in your head. So, not that Mighty Monk ever touched money, not in public. The gang he ran, which ran the school for him, was his collection agency. That's people who get money. So a collection agency collects money. They were Clutter's Cobras, a name spelled out in nail heads on 6 well-known black plastic windbreakers. They have their own jackets. And a cobra, with a C, is a type of snake. And so I want you to think too, like, how might these kids be like a snake? Because as we know, authors don't do anything on accident. So I don't think their name happens to be the Cobras, especially when they're also using the word gang, which is a connotated word that may not always be positive, especially when it's the Clutter's Cobras on top of that. So Monk's threads were more subtle, threads of clothes. So they're wearing these black plastic windbreakers. His clothes are more subtle. A pile-lined suede battle jacket with lizard skin flaps over tailored Levi's and a pair of ostrich skin boots, brass-toed and suitable for kicking people around. One of his cobras did nothing all day but walk a half step behind Monk, carrying a fitted bag with Monk's gym shoes, a roll of restroom passes, a cash box, and a switchblade that Monk gave himself manicures with at lunch over at the Cobra's table. So Monk is like total leader of this group because not only is he like cool dude with his ostrich skin boots and he's got his knife that he digs out of his fingernails with, but like he's got a kid behind him carrying a bag with all his stuff in it. So speaking of lunch, there were a few cases of advanced malnutrition among the newer kids. The ones who were a little slow in handing over a cut of their lunch money and were therefore barred from the cafeteria. Monk ran a tight ship. So I think it's pretty clear who has the power right now. He's got the power, and especially this idea of newer kids. So I'm wondering if that's going to come into play. Why are we mentioning newer kids here? So I admit it. I'm 5'5", and when the cobras slithered by, so look at that, cobras are slithering. So when you're writing, how can you purposely name and then use words associated with that, like cobra slither, snake slither? When the cobra slithered by with or without Monk, I shrank. And I admit this too, I paid up on a regular basis, and I might add, so would you. This school was old Monk's Garden of Eden. Garden of Eden, that's a biblical reference. Unfortunately for him, there was a serpent in it. The reason Monk didn't recognize trouble when it was staring him in the face is that the serpent in the cobra's Eden was a girl. So I'm wondering if he assumed a girl couldn't do anything or what. But the Garden of Eden, that means Monk's living the good life. He is, that reference is the idea of Adam and Eve. And, the serpent is what caused them to make poor choices. And so it was just lurking and they didn't realize it. So practically every guy in school could show you his scars, fang marks from the cobras, you might say. Another snake reference. Look at that, they're doing it everywhere. And they were all highly visible in the shower room. Lumps, lacerations, blue bruises, you name it. But girls usually got off with a warning. Except there was this one girl named Priscilla Roseberry. Picture a girl named Priscilla Roseberry and you'll be light years off. So then, I like that they say picture a girl named Priscilla Roseberry. And I want you to do that. Like picture what Priscilla Roseberry might look like. And, we talked about prejudices before and how our brain looks to put things into categories, whether we like it or not, but being able to recognize, okay, I know what my brain's doing, but let's reconsider this. So Priscilla was hands down the largest student in our particular institution of learning. I'm not talking fat, I am talking big, even beautiful in a bionic way. Priscilla wasn't inclined toward organized crime. Otherwise, she could have put together a gang that would turn Clutter's cobras into garter snakes, because cobras are deadly. And so they're going to turn the deadly snakes into garter snakes, which don't have any real bite to them. Priscilla was basically a loner, except she had one friend, a little guy named Melvin Detweiler. You talk about the odd couple. Melvin's one of the smallest guys you've ever seen. A really nice guy, but little. They even had lockers next to each other in the same bank as mine. So like a bank of lockers would be like that section of lockers. I don't know what they had going. I'm not saying this was a romance. After all, people deserve their privacy. So like people don't even really know that much about her or him or whatever. And I wonder who's telling this story too. I don't know that we've seen his name yet. And so I wonder if that's important or if it's just the fact that like he's recounting what he saw and we start talking about reliability because it's first person. And if he saw it as first person, we're getting his perspective. But like, as I continue, I also kind of wonder like what Priscilla or Melvin or what's his name, Monk are thinking too. So Priscilla was sort of above everything, if you'll pardon a pun. A pun is like, it's kind of funny because she's above everything, like metaphorically, like in attitude, like whatever, this isn't worth my time, like, okay, whatever, people. But she's also literally above people because she's so tall and very calm as only the big can be. If there was anybody who didn't notice Clutter's cobras, it was Priscilla. And I bet Monk don't like that. Until one winter day after school when we were all grabbing our coats out of our lockers and hurrying since Clutter's cobras made sweeps of the hall for after-school shakedowns. Anyway, up to Melvin's locker swaggers one of the cobras. Never mind his name. Gang members don't need names. They've got group identity. And, thinking in our society where we've talked about like as a group, you're representing when we go on field trips or things like you're representing all of us, not just you, that group identity. He reaches down and grabs little Melvin by the neck and slams his head against a locker door. The sound of his skull against steel rippled all the way down the locker row, speeding the crowds on their way. Okay, let's see your pass, snarls the cobra. A pass for what this time? Melvin asks, possibly still dazed. Let's call it a pass for very short people, says the cobra. A tax. He wheezes a little cobra chuckle at his own witness, and already he's reaching for Melvin's wallet with the hand that isn't circling Melvin's windpipe. All this time, of course, Melvin and the cobra are standing in Priscilla's big shadow. Okay, she's about to get important, I can already tell, because they're mentioning her. They are standing in her shadow. So look at what he did here. Richard Peck put them in her shadow. So who's the light shining on and who is kind of below the rest of it? She's taking her time, shoving her books into her locker and pulling on a very large size coat. Then quicker than the eye, she brings the side of her enormous hand down in a chop that breaks the cobra's hold on Melvin's throat. You could hear a pin drop in that hallway. Nobody's ever laid a finger on a cobra, let alone a hand the size of Priscilla's. Then Priscilla, who hardly ever says anything to anybody except to Melvin, says to the cobra, "Who's your leader, wimp?" This practically blows the cobra away. First, he's chopped by a girl, and now she's acting like she doesn't know Monk Clutter, the head honcho of the world. He's so amazed he tells her. Monk Clutter? I wonder how she's going to deal with this one, too. So, who's your hero? Never heard of him, Priscilla mentions. Send him to see me. The cobra just backs away from her like the whole situation is too big for him, which it is. There's another reference to size. Pretty soon, Monk himself slides up, jerks his head once, and his cobras slither. There we go again. Slither off down the hall. He's going to handle this interesting case personally. Who is it around here doesn't know Monk Clutter? He's standing inches from Priscilla, but since he'd have to look up at her, he doesn't. Never heard of him, says Priscilla. Monk's not happy with this answer, but by now he's spotted Melvin, who's grown smaller in spite of himself. Monk breaks his own rule by reaching for Melvin with his own hands. Kid, he says, you're going to have to educate your girlfriend. His hand never quite makes it to Melvin. In a move of pure poetry, Priscilla has Monk in a hammerlock. Or you grab his neck. His neck's popping like gunfire and his head's bowed under the immense weight of her forearm. His suede jacket's peeling back, showing pile. Priscilla's behind him in another easy motion, and with a single mighty thrust forward, Frog marches Monk into her own locker. It's incredible. His ostrich skin boots clink once in the air, and suddenly he's gone, neatly wedged into the locker, a perfect fit. So not only is he going to the locker, but he's going into the locker. Priscilla bangs the door shut, twirls the lock, and strolls out of school. Melvin goes with her, of course, trotting along below her shoulder. The last stragglers leave quietly. Well, this is where fate, an even bigger force than Priscilla, steps in. It snows all that night, a blizzard. The whole town ices up, and school closes for a week. So where's Monk for this entire week of school? You know, I like something that Richard Peck's doing here. Like when you talk about the idea of like a bully, you have a victim, and then we have the person who stands up. So you have the and the defender who stands up for the bully. So the bully's being the one picking on someone. The victim is the one that the bully's picking on, and then the defender defends the bully. And so look how they used, you know, the victim was small. He was a small size. The defender, which was, this is Priscilla here. So we have the bully was Monk. The victim was Melvin. And then Priscilla, she was the one who was, I just got her name spelled incorrectly. Priscilla is the one who was the defender, and look at how big she is in stature. Remember, she's really tall. She is shadowing the bully. And then Monk, you know, they talk about all of the ways that he's dressed and kind of his demeanor. But like she doesn't care that he's the bully. And so, you know, I don't know, did she turn into the bully? Because you kind of also have that, you know, she shoved him in a locker and he was there for several days. Do you think that she told anyone he was there? Do you think anyone told anyone that he was there? And so is that okay because he had bullied so many others for so long that when something happens to him, that it's okay that nobody said anything, or maybe someone did and we just don't know? But as we look at that idea of power, it's clear at the beginning, Monk, he's the one who's holding the power with all of this. And how does, when he holds the power, how does that influence the people around? You know, we've talked about how leadership, the person who's in charge, can influence the community as a whole. And then you have Melvin, who's maybe not influencing, but Priscilla definitely is, because at the end, the power has gone to her. And all these other kids saw her stand up to him. And so I wonder, you know, will more people defend now? Because as you know, once the first person has done it, that's the hardest part, is being the first. Whether it's the first to stand up for something, the first to voice a concern, the first to clap, whatever it is, the first is usually the most difficult. If there's a standing ovation, the first person to stand up for that, you know, there's got to be someone who's first. But now, do the onlookers, the people who've been watching who don't like this and didn't know what to do, might they feel more power now? So, you know, maybe we're kind of going from this idea of like a tyranny, and then we're going maybe to a democracy, or at least the idea that more people will have the power and maybe we won't have to pay for little slips. You know, I kind of think of this as like with Yertle the Turtle when we did that one, that idea of where the power is. So, all right, that was Priscilla and the Wimps by Richard Peck.